So, today we're going to talk about workaholism. I do have this question about whether or not it's real. I think it is. But even if it is it bad? And amongst all of the things we could care about in HR, should we be concerned about workaholism? Well, that discussion is coming up now. And here we are on the HR Hub podcast with me, Andrea Adams. Keep listening to learn about this and anything else related to HR. You can also find me on YouTube. So today my guest is again Dr. Connelly, as I've said a few times because I've hosted her a number of times now. I found her on ChatGPT when I was looking for an HR expert. She's an HR professor and a researcher from McMaster University. She has written a book, she writes papers, and our topic today is the outcome or is related to a paper she co-authored. Hi, Catherine, how are you?
Hi, Andrea. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So workaholism, I'm going to dive right in because my dad really, I think he was a workaholic, but it was really born out of, I think, a lot of difficult childhood experiences and being poor as a child. So I don't know if it was bad or good, but how do you define workaholism and what's the difference between a workaholic and someone who just has a lot to do?
Oh, yeah, that's a great distinction. So we actually included both in our study because they're both things that happen, right? So there's a difference, though, between somebody who is just busy and has to work a lot versus somebody who's a workaholic and wants to work a lot and actually wants to work all the time and actually is sad when they're not working and feels anxious when they're not working. And it's almost this feeling of withdrawal from having that positive feelings associated with working, right? So somebody who works a lot and this is positive for them, but then they go off and have happy hobbies or home life or other activities, they're not a workaholic. But somebody whose life is dominated by the need to work, this psychological need to always be working, that's somebody where it's more of a workaholic because it's a less positive way of living in the world.
Mm-hmm. What's driving this need? And I don't know if you uncovered this in your research, but what's driving this need when it's a workaholic to work all the time?
Yeah, so that's not something we uncovered in our research, but there are a few possibilities in that it could be a trait. So this could be your personality. This could just be who you are, or this could be a learned behavior where you have learned that the world is an unstable or dangerous place. And the way to deal with that is to be a workaholic, kind of this learned behavior where you cope maybe in a somewhat dysfunctional way, but you're coping with the world by what feels like adaptive behaviors to always be working, but actually it could be maladaptive because it's crowding out other important things in your life.
Mm-hmm. Sounds a little bit like my description of my dad. uh, so can you briefly tell us why you even decided to do this research? It seems like we hardly ever talk about workaholism anymore. We talk about work-life balance and uh, motivation. It's almost like we maybe have the opposite problem these days with people not working hard enough. Like, why did you do this research?
Yeah, so we wanted to do this research for a few different reasons. One was, like you say, people have kind of forgotten about this as an issue, and it's almost considered like a humble brag, right?
Oh,
Like,
totally.
how are you
1000%.
so busy? Like, oh, what's your flaw in this interview we're having? Oh, I care too much. I work too hard, right? So it's almost like, I don't know, gone too far in pop culture. It's like, is it really that bad? But I mean, with the academic literature, we were tying workaholism to all kinds of bad outcomes, but for the worker, right?
Did you
So,
say bad outcomes for the worker?
oh yeah, so people with high levels of workaholism, like they lower levels of job satisfaction, they're stressed out, their well-being is lower, like turnover can be high. Like it's generally not considered to be a positive outcome. But all this research was centered on the worker, right? In terms of, workaholic is not great for the worker. But we were starting to wonder, okay, but what about the organization, right? So if you have all these workaholics in your company, is that a good thing? Maybe not. Maybe not, actually.
Okay. So, and you found that workaholism and not just being busy, but workaholism
Mhm.
is bad for the organization. How so?
Okay, yeah. So we found it was a problem specifically when we looked at employees, what we call moral voice. So this isn't just,
Can I stop you there for a second? Did you look at more things besides moral voice, or was that something that just floated to the surface?
oh, so we measured something else called silence. I don't know if it's worth getting into the weeds of it, but we were really interested in what, kind of broadly speaking, this ability for people to feel comfortable speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
And so speaking up, not just about, better ways of doing things and improving things for the company, but also about ethical issues that they might have observed.
How
So,
would you ever, sorry to interrupt, but I'm so curious, how would you ever, like I wouldn't ever in my mind, bring workaholism and people's willingness to speak up together and then decide that this is a topic we should research? Like, how did that bubble up and you and your, the co-authors on this paper decide this is something we should look at?
yeah. So the thing with workaholism is that, like, these are not bad people, right?
No.
Not at all. But they end up with, you could almost call it like a tunnel vision,
Mm.
where they focus very much on work to the point where work becomes the most important thing. And they might become a little bit isolated. They might not have a lot of other outlets because work is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're thinking about organizations and this idea of people um, doing the right thing in the organization, you can see how it could be different for the workaholics than for just regular employee who has weaker ties to the organization, in terms of how it would unfold. And so, on one hand, somebody who is so focused on the organization might notice more things to fix, right? They might be
Mm-hmm.
more tuned into it. But on the other hand, there's bit of a triage in terms of what is the most important thing. Success of the organization. Can I say anything? Oh, I don't know. My identity is wrapped up in how things are being done right now.
Mm.
Right. So what we found was that the people who were workaholics, they were more likely to morally disengage. And in this case, they were more likely to use like euphemistic language about something that was going on. They were more likely to have like a ends justifies the means kind of thing. Like, okay, I know the
Mm-hmm.
company's doing it this way, but it's only because we have to keep the company successful and we'll just cut this corner and it's fine because the company has to succeed. And so it's almost as though the workaholics were too wrapped up in the company,
Mm.
whereas people who had a little bit more distance from it, they were maybe using kind of their usual frame of reference, and it wasn't distorted by how big working just loomed for them.
Right. They had a more holistic view of the workplace, in society, and in their lives, maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't measure this, but there is a somewhat warranted stereotype that if you're going to have a whistleblower in your company, it's going to be a woman. And you wonder if it's because women have more going on in their lives that provides more of a frame of reference where they do not get so sucked in to working and having their identity be their work and work being the most important thing. So we didn't examine that in our study, but it has kind of raised that question for me.
Huh. Interesting. Whereas in many organizations, it sort of starts getting subtly, complain or sort of starts subtly getting associated with some female employees.
Hmm.
And yet it's because women may be more balanced. Okay, those are my words, not yours, but still very fascinating. When you talk about moral, their willingness to do the right thing and their, what did you call it? Moral
Disengagement. Yeah.
moral
So,
disengagement.
yeah.
If they have moral disengagement and they're so concerned about organizational success,
Mm-hmm.
I've got two questions about that. I guess I have to ask the first one. Should we not all be so concerned about organizational success? That's why we're being paid. We're being paid to make sure the organization is successful.
Yeah, so we do want the organization to be successful, but successful for the right reasons, right? So if say the organization is saving money because they're just dumping all their chemicals into the river, well, okay, short term they might be successful, but as soon as people find out you've poisoned the well, literally, then that's the end of your company, right?
Right. Yeah.
Same thing with, say, in a hospital with patient care, that, okay, maybe you're quicker at seeing patients if you cut some corners with disinfecting your instruments between patients, but when your patients go septic and die, that's a problem. Yeah.
Right. Right. You need people to be morally engaged. Okay. Thank you for those examples. The second question I had out of that is, if they're morally disengaged, what is going to be the impact on psychological safety? Did you guys look at that at all?
Yeah, so psychological safety wasn't in the study, but I think psychological safety is like implicitly part of this, right?
Yeah.
So people will not speak up if they worry about the reaction that there's going to be to what they've said, right? So people have to feel psychologically safe in order to feel comfortable speaking up. Even if it's not to notice a problem, but even if it's just something minor, like, oh, we should change this process to something better, right? Anytime you put yourself out there in terms of a new idea or a different way of doing things, you only do that if you feel psychologically safe enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't something we examined, but I think people should consider that for sure.
Yeah, it just seems to me that if they're morally disengaged, that they would shut people down more often for raising their ideas that are misaligned with how they see organizational success.
That's interesting. Yeah, I could see leaders who are morally disengaged maybe not creating an environment on the team where people
Mm-hmm.
can speak up. So that's
Right.
interesting. Yeah, that'd be a great future study.
Yeah. Uh, so your research covered the UK and Italy.
Yeah,
Did it cover Canada at all, or just those two countries?
yeah,
Those
it's
two.
just those two countries. Yeah.
So were there differences? And I expect there are, but maybe there aren't, and that would surprise me, between the UK and Italy.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is we did not find differences.
What?
So yeah, I know. So um, workaholism is a little bit higher in general in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So you would expect that alone to cause more of these like differences in what the findings would be. Um, but we were focusing a little bit more on the relationship between, like, if you are a workaholic, then what are the implications for
Mm-hmm.
your behaviors and how you frame things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you might be less likely to be a workaholic in Italy, but if you are, then the pattern of outcomes is pretty much the same. I think some things are just human nature.
Mm-hmm. So overall, what do you know, if you could wrap this up, what do you think the implications are for HR and how we practice HR, how we, I mean, there's just so many, like how we reward hard workers, how we reward people who are creating success for the organization, and then how we use what you've uncovered to create high performing workplaces that are going to succeed in the long term. That was a lot of questions wrapped up in one, but you do what you can.
Yeah, so I think part of it goes back to, okay, who are you going to hire? Right. And so you might have a really appealing candidate who you dig a little bit more into the references and you find some signs that they might be a bit of a workaholic. Right. So if that is a possible applicant,
How would you know from a references and from an interview that this person's a workaholic?
well, you can ask them. Right. So if people joke about it, how like they like to
Oh,
work and their
yeah.
hobby is also their work and they think
Oh,
about their
yes.
job all the time and isn't that
Yes.
great, right? So
Yeah,
if
not
that
good.
is how they see themselves, there's a good chance that is how they are.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean never hire them, right? But
Mhm.
it means you want to keep an eye on them in relation to, is it getting out of control? And then also, what um, systems and processes do you have in place that could maybe mitigate some of the decisions that you might have to make? So, if you can standardize within your workspace this idea that we do not use euphemisms to describe stakeholders, right? That we like, so you cannot disengage from
Mm.
the outcomes of your actions. Um, and if you do not allow people to diffuse responsibility in terms of the company has to make us do this. No, it is the employee who is taking actions and who will be accountable. Then it's something that's kind of taking into account the fact that any employee could disengage and
Mhm.
maybe make ethically questionable behaviors. And so you want to catch any employee who does that.
Mm.
But also at the back of your mind, just because someone is a good employee doesn't mean that they are immune to this, right? And so even maybe your best employee might be cutting corners or might be making bad decisions that they should not be making. And so the more you can kind of bake that into your whole organization, the more likely it is that people will be supported in making good decisions and not tempted to kind of hide any problems that are there.
Mhm. It takes a real level of leadership um to build a culture that is ethical and to call stuff out when just say from your high performer, which this is almost an HR stereotype. You get this high performer that's torching relationships everywhere, that you don't tolerate that.
So,
I can see though in even just successful employees that they are so confident about their success that they don't have to they feel like they're not above the law, but they can sort of cut corners, cut ethical corners, and not feel bad about that. And it's all that stuff to pay attention to.
Oh, yeah, there's this interesting calculus that sometimes people will make in that, well, I did so well at this, therefore it's fine if I do that. Or I'm a good person because I do these things, so it doesn't matter that I
Mm,
hurt this person in this way.
yes.
And then there's also this phenomenon we call idiosyncrasy credits, which is basically the better somebody performs over a long period of time is they build up these credits where they can do something off script or weird or bad later. And we just give them a pass. We just don't mind because they've built up so much goodwill before. And it's never intended to be that way, but you could end up with a situation where somebody has a long history with the organization, they've been a great performer, and so things will slide when they do something that's against policy or that you don't actually want them to do, but you have to take it super seriously. Also because it sends a message to everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Idiosyncrasy credits. That yeah, I got to put that one in the back of my mind. All right, where could someone find this paper? Like, do they have to have a subscription to, I don't know, whatever magazine or?
Oh, yeah. So this is published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior, and we have paid for it to be open source. So that means
Oh.
anybody is allowed to read it. They're very welcome to download it anytime. They can find it on my website. It's connellyresearch.com, and
Mhm.
they can forward it to anybody else who might also be interested. It's free to everybody.
Okay. And I imagine they can also find you on connellyresearch.com.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Let's close this. Well, thanks, Catherine. That was so interesting about really what it takes to create and sustain the moral fabric of our organizations and the value. Like, it might be expedient to cut corners. And that's very short-term thinking. What are we thinking about the long term? Catherine and I had another discussion on what to do when you've been told to stop DEI, and that has certainly a ethical angle to it. Otherwise, thanks for listening out there, and we'll catch you next time when I talk with another amazing guest.